April 14th, 1944, 0940 hours. High Command of the Wehrmacht Intelligence, Berlin. Major Heinz Weber studied the reconnaissance photographs spread across the table, his jaw tightening with each image. Rows of tanks, supply dumps, artillery parks, radio masts indicating divisional headquarters, all positioned in southeastern England near Dover and Folkestone, the narrowest point of the English Channel, the obvious staging area for invasion of Pas-de-Calais. He reached for the phone. "Get me Army Group B. Tell them the British First Army Group is real. Concentration near Dover confirmed. Tank strength estimates between 400 and 600 vehicles. Infantry divisions estimated at 8 to 12. This is their main invasion force." Across the Channel, in a muddy field in Kent, Major Geoffrey Barkas of the British Army's Camouflage Development and Training Centre stood beside what Major Weber had identified as a Churchill tank. Barkas tapped it with his knuckles. The sound was hollow. Canvas stretched over pneumatic tubes and wooden frames, weighing less than 100 pounds, assembled in under an hour by 4 men with a bicycle pump. He looked at his chief designer, Jasper Maskelyne, stage magician turned military deception officer, who was securing another inflatable tank to ground stakes to prevent wind from revealing the illusion. "How many do we have operational?" 247 tanks as of this morning, 53 artillery pieces, 32 supply dumps, 18 radio masts. The entire First Army Group, present and accounted for, except it doesn't exist, and never will. Barkas nodded, watching German reconnaissance aircraft making another pass at 20,000 feet. "Let's hope Herr Weber appreciates our craftsmanship." The deception necessity. By spring 1944, Allied planners faced a strategic problem that threatened the entire D-Day operation. German defensive forces in France outnumbered Allied invasion forces, and if concentrated at the actual landing beaches in Normandy, would likely throw the invasion back into the sea with catastrophic casualties. The solution required convincing German high command that the main invasion would strike Pas-de-Calais, the obvious target, closest to England, shortest supply line, most direct route to Germany. If German forces concentrated there, the actual landings in Normandy would face reduced opposition during the critical first days when beachheads were most vulnerable. The deception operation, codenamed Fortitude, would be the most elaborate military deception ever attempted, involving fake armies, fraudulent radio traffic, double agents feeding false intelligence, and physical props that would convince German reconnaissance that massive invasion forces were preparing to strike where they weren't. Central to Fortitude's physical deception was the creation of entirely fictional armies that would appear real to German aerial reconnaissance, radar, and signals intelligence. The task fell to men like Major Barkas, who'd worked as film set designer before the war, and Jasper Maskelyne, whose family had performed stage illusions in London's West End for 3 generations. The challenge was unprecedented. Create divisions that would fool experienced German intelligence analysts who'd studied every aspect of Allied order of battle. Make fake tanks, artillery, supply dumps, and encampments convincing enough that photographs taken from aircraft at 20,000 feet would show exactly what German analysts expected to see. Maintain the illusion for months without German spies or reconnaissance discovering the deception. The penalty for failure was measured in Allied casualties, thousands of soldiers who'd die on Normandy beaches if German forces weren't deceived about invasion location. The reward for success was the liberation of Europe, the mad inventor. Jasper Maskelyne brought to military deception a lifetime of understanding how to fool human perception. Born into Britain's most famous family of stage magicians, he'd performed illusions at London theatres before war broke out. His speciality was misdirection, making audiences see what he wanted them to see while hiding what he didn't. The principles translated perfectly to military deception. Understand what enemy expects to see. Present exactly that. Ensure they never look at what's actually happening. When Maskelyne volunteered for military service in 1940, the Army initially assigned him to camouflage duties, painting vehicles in disruptive patterns, erecting concealment for artillery positions. He found this defensive thinking inadequate. Camouflage hid things. Deception created false realities. The difference was strategic. He began experimenting with offensive deception in North Africa, creating dummy tanks that drew Italian artillery fire away from real armor. The dummies were crude, wooden frames covered with canvas painted to resemble tanks, but they worked. Italian gunners wasted ammunition shooting at decoys while real British tanks maneuvered unmolested. By 1943, Maskelyne was designing increasingly sophisticated deceptions. Inflatable tanks that could be deployed rapidly and appeared convincing from aerial reconnaissance. Dummy artillery that created muzzle flash when smoke charges detonated. Fake supply dumps constructed from painted canvas that suggested massive logistical preparation. Each deception tested limits of enemy intelligence capabilities, discovering what fooled them and what didn't. His work caught attention of fortitude planners, who needed exactly his expertise. Create an entire army from nothing. Make it convincing enough to fool German high command for months. Maintain the illusion while real forces prepared for actual invasion. Maskelyne assembled a team of designers, sculptors, carpenters, and engineers, many recruited from film industry and theater. They understood visual deception, how light and shadow created illusion, how detail convinced observers they were seeing reality. Their workshop in Kent became laboratory for developing fake armies. The work was experimental, chaotic, and absolutely essential. They'd sketch designs for inflatable tanks, build prototypes, photograph them from various angles and altitudes, adjust designs based on what photographs revealed, rebuild. The goal was perfection at 20,000 feet. The altitude German reconnaissance aircraft flew. Close inspection would reveal fakery immediately, but German aircraft wouldn't get close inspection. They'd get photographs taken from high altitude through cameras with specific resolution limits. Maskelyne understood those limits perfectly. He knew exactly how much detail was necessary to create convincing illusion and how much could be omitted because cameras wouldn't detect it. His tanks had proper shadow patterns. Gun barrels had correct proportions. Hatches were positioned accurately. But interior details were absent because cameras couldn't see inside. The illusion was perfect for its intended observer and completely economical in construction. Building the Ghost Army. Construction of the fake First Army Group required industrial-scale production of military equipment that would never fire a shot. Maskelyne's team designed inflatable tanks based on pneumatic principles developed for barrage balloons. Rubberized canvas formed the tank body, supported by internal tubes inflated with bicycle pumps. Wooden frames provided structure for turrets and gun barrels. The entire assembly weighed under 100 pounds and could be inflated and positioned by 4 men in 30 minutes. From ground level, the deception was obvious. Canvas skin moved in wind. Proportions were slightly wrong. Weight distribution was impossible for actual armored vehicle. But from 20,000 feet, photographed through reconnaissance cameras with limited resolution, they appeared identical to real Churchill and Sherman tanks. The production numbers were staggering. British factories manufactured over 1,000 inflatable tanks between late 1943 and spring 1944. Each was carefully painted with appropriate camouflage patterns, weathered to suggest operational use, and equipped with details that created visual authenticity: spare track sections, stowage boxes, antennas. Artillery followed similar principles. Wooden frames, resembling 25-pounder field guns, were constructed with proper dimensions and shadow patterns. Dummy ammunition was stacked nearby. Wooden crates painted to match real munitions. Gun crews were represented by painted canvas figures positioned around weapons, creating impression of active battery from aerial observation. Supply dumps required different deception techniques. Real supplies were compact, dense, carefully organized. Fake supplies needed to appear equally substantial while using minimal actual material. The solution was theater scenery techniques. Wooden frames covered with painted canvas, creating three-dimensional illusion of stacked crates, fuel drums, ammunition pallets. From altitude, the dumps appeared as extensive as real logistics facilities. Vehicle parks presented unique challenge. Parked vehicles created distinctive patterns: regular spacing, access roads, maintenance areas. Maskelyne's team studied photographs of real vehicle concentrations, analyzing spacing patterns, shadow angles, organizational logic. They replicated these precisely, positioning inflatable vehicles with mathematical accuracy that matched British Army doctrine for vehicle park organization. The effort was enormous. Over 2,000 fake vehicles and artillery pieces were manufactured and deployed across southeastern England. Hundreds of fake supply dumps were constructed. Dozens of fake headquarters facilities were erected with appropriate radio masts and security perimeters. An entire army was conjured from canvas, wood, and paint. The supporting details. Physical deception required supporting elements that validated visual illusion through other intelligence channels. Radio traffic was critical. German signals intelligence monitored Allied radio communications constantly, tracking units by their transmissions, analyzing communication patterns to deduce organizational structures and operational intentions. The fake First Army Group needed radio presence matching real Army Group. Divisional headquarters, regimental commands, logistics nets, all communicating with appropriate volume and content. The solution was Ghost Army radio operators transmitting scripted traffic from locations matching fake force dispositions. Operators worked from recordings of real military communications, learning proper procedures, technical terminology, communication patterns. Their transmissions sounded authentic because they were based on genuine examples. The content was carefully crafted. Logistics requests for spare parts specific to tank models supposedly stationed in area. Personnel reports matching unit structures German intelligence would expect. Movement orders consistent with pre-invasion training schedules. Weather reports, administrative traffic, the mundane communications that characterized actual military operations. German signals intelligence intercepted these transmissions, triangulated transmission locations, analyzed communication patterns. Everything confirmed what reconnaissance photographs showed. Major Allied forces concentrating near Dover, preparing for invasion across shortest channel crossing. Sound effects enhanced the deception. Fake tank parks needed engine noise consistent with hundreds of armored vehicles undergoing maintenance and training. The solution was loudspeakers, broadcasting recordings of tank engines, played at volumes and times matching operational patterns. German agents monitoring from distance heard what they expected: the characteristic rumble of armored divisions preparing for combat. Visual activity maintained the illusion. Soldiers moved around fake installations, performing maintenance on inflatable tanks, positioning supplies, conducting activities that created impression of active military base. From altitude, these activities appeared identical to real military operations. The attention to detail was obsessive. Fake vehicle tracks were carved into roads and fields, tire patterns matching specific vehicle types, depths suggesting appropriate vehicle weights. Oil stains appeared beneath fake engines. Laundry lines showed clothing drying near fake barracks. Every element supported the central deception. This was real military force preparing for combat operations. Feeding the intelligence. Deception required not just creating illusion, but ensuring German intelligence observed it through channels they trusted. Double agents, German spies, captured by British and turned to feed false intelligence back to their handlers, played critical roles. They reported seeing tank concentrations near Dover, enormous supply buildups, security restrictions consistent with pre-invasion preparations. Their reports corroborated what reconnaissance photographs showed. The agents were carefully managed. British counterintelligence fed them information that was accurate in detail, but false in implication. Unit identifications were real. These divisions existed. Equipment descriptions matched actual British vehicles. Locations were genuine. Forces were where agents reported. But the forces were fake, created specifically to be observed and reported. German intelligence had no way to distinguish truth from deception. Their agents reported accurately what they observed. Reconnaissance photographs confirmed agent reports. Radio intelligence matched both. Every intelligence channel told consistent story. Major invasion force forming in southeastern England, targeting Pas-de-Calais. Neutral diplomatic channels provided additional confirmation. Swedish diplomats observed military buildups near Dover and reported them through channels German intelligence monitored. Swiss businessmen traveling in England mentioned seeing tank convoys and troop concentrations. None were deliberate German spies, but their observations reached German analysts who incorporated them into intelligence assessments. The deception was layered, redundant, mutually supporting. No single source could be dismissed as unreliable because all sources confirmed each other. German analysts examining evidence from multiple channels reached conclusion deception planners wanted. Allied main effort would strike Pas-de-Calais. Secondary operations might occur elsewhere, but primary invasion force was positioned for shortest channel crossing. The German response. German High Command responded exactly as Allied planners hoped, by reinforcing Pas-de-Calais at expense of other sectors. Panzer divisions were positioned to counter invasion across narrowest channel crossing. Infantry divisions dug defensive positions along Calais coast. Artillery was concentrated to repel landings on beaches opposite Dover. Luftwaffe squadrons were based at airfields, positioned to strike invasion fleet crossing channel at its narrowest point. The defensive preparations were extensive and perfectly positioned for invasion that would never come. Every German soldier, tank and gun stationed at Calais was unavailable for deployment to Normandy, where actual landings would occur. Intelligence assessments presented to Hitler confirmed the deception. Maps showed Allied force concentrations near Dover. Order of battle estimates identified specific divisions. First Army Group with multiple corps, each with several divisions. Total strength estimated at 12 divisions with over 400 tanks. The fictional army was treated as real threat requiring real response. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, commanding German forces in Western Europe, positioned his mobile reserves to counter invasion at Calais. Even after Allied forces landed in Normandy on June 6th, German commanders interpreted it as secondary operation. The real invasion would still come at Calais, where strongest Allied forces were concentrated. The 15th Army remained at Calais, waiting for invasion that never materialized, while German forces in Normandy fought desperately without reinforcement. By the time German intelligence realized the First Army Group didn't exist, Allied forces had established unbreakable beachhead in Normandy. The deception had bought critical days when German reinforcements might have pushed Allies back into sea. The revelation. German intelligence began suspecting deception in late June, when expected Calais invasion never materialized despite Allied successes in Normandy. Reconnaissance flights over southeastern England intensified, attempting to confirm First Army Group remained poised for invasion. Photographs showed the same tank concentrations, supply dumps, headquarters facilities. But analysts noted disturbing consistency. Vehicles hadn't moved, supplies hadn't diminished, training activities hadn't evolved as expected for forces preparing for imminent operations. Ground intelligence confirmed suspicions. German agents attempting closer observation of facilities reported impossibilities. Entire tank parks with no fuel consumption. Divisions with no casualty replacements. Headquarters generating radio traffic but minimal vehicle movement. The accumulated anomalies suggested possibility too embarrassing to acknowledge, that Germany's military intelligence had been comprehensively fooled for months. Final confirmation came in August, when advancing Allied forces overran areas where First Army Group supposedly operated. German forces expected to capture enormous supply dumps, encounter rear echelon facilities, find evidence of 12 divisions. Instead, they found deflated rubber tanks, wooden artillery pieces, and painted canvas representing supplies that never existed. The humiliation was complete. Germany had positioned significant forces to counter Phantom Army while real invasion occurred elsewhere. The 15th Army, 17 divisions strong, had sat idle at Calais through June and July, unavailable to reinforce desperate fighting in Normandy because German intelligence believed fake forces required real defensive response. Post-war interrogations revealed depth of deception's success. Senior German intelligence officers admitted they'd never suspected the First Army Group was fiction. The physical evidence, radio traffic, agent reports, and photographic intelligence all confirmed its existence. The deception was so comprehensive, so consistent across multiple intelligence channels, that questioning it seemed irrational. Major Weber, whose reconnaissance analysis identified the fake tanks as real threats, later acknowledged professional respect for the deception's sophistication. The British had understood exactly what German intelligence would observe, exactly how analysts would interpret that evidence, and created perfect illusion that exploited every assumption and methodology German intelligence employed. The cost-benefit. The fake army's impact on D-Day success was measurable in casualties avoided and objectives achieved. Allied forces landing in Normandy faced approximately 50,000 German defenders in immediate landing areas, formidable but manageable given Allied air superiority and naval gunfire support. If the 15th Army's 17 divisions had been available for immediate counterattack, Allied forces would have faced over 300,000 German troops with extensive armor support. The resulting battle might have pushed invasion back into sea. Instead, German reinforcements to Normandy were delayed by days or weeks, while High Command waited for main invasion at Calais. By the time they realized the First Army Group was fiction, Allied forces had established positions that couldn't be dislodged. The beachhead was secure, supplies were flowing, reinforcements were arriving. Normandy became base for liberation of France rather than graveyard for Allied invasion forces. The cost of deception was minimal compared to benefit. Manufacturing fake equipment cost thousands of pounds, negligible compared to cost of real tanks or casualties that would have resulted without deception. Personnel requirements were tiny. Dozens of men creating illusion versus divisions that would have been needed for actual combat operations. The strategic return on investment was extraordinary. A few hundred inflatable tanks and talented stage magician had accomplished what additional combat divisions might not have, convincing German high command to position forces where they couldn't interfere with actual invasion. The field at dawn. Kent, July 1944. The dismantling. Jasper Maskelyne stood in muddy field, watching soldiers deflate the last tanks of fictional division that had helped win the war without firing shot. Canvas skin collapsed. Wooden frames were disassembled. Materials were loaded onto trucks for transport to storage or new deception operations. Overhead, a German reconnaissance aircraft made another pass, still photographing positions that would soon show empty fields rather than armored concentrations. Maskelyne wondered what analysts in Berlin would make of photographs showing tank parks disappearing overnight. Perhaps they'd finally understand they'd been fooled. Perhaps they'd rationalize it somehow. Forces moved to France, redeployed elsewhere, anything except admitting comprehensive deception. He'd spent 18 months creating army from nothing, maintaining illusion through attention to detail that would have impressed his grandfather, who'd performed stage illusions for London audiences who demanded perfection. The principles were identical. Understand audience expectations. Present exactly what they anticipate seeing. Ensure they never examine too closely what you're actually doing. The difference was scale and consequence. Stage illusions entertained. Military deceptions saved lives. The inflatable tanks being packed onto trucks had contributed to victory more effectively than many real tanks because they'd drawn German forces away from decisive battle. The wooden artillery pieces had been more valuable than functional guns because they'd created threat that required defensive response. A lieutenant approached. "That's the last of them, sir. Field's clear. Orders for next assignment?" Maskelyne lit a cigarette and looked at empty field where division had supposedly prepared for invasion. "We're heading to France. Different deceptions, same principles. Jerry still believes what he sees through reconnaissance cameras. Our job is making sure he sees what we want him to see." The trucks departed, leaving field as empty and unremarkable as it had been before fake army arrived. Grass would grow over vehicle tracks. Rain would wash away oil stains. Within months, no evidence would remain that entire armored division had supposedly operated here. But in German military archives, reconnaissance photographs would document what analysts had believed they were observing: massive Allied force concentration that required defensive response. Those photographs would serve as testament to deception's power. That perception could be manipulated, that enemies could be fooled, that sometimes the most effective weapons were the ones that never existed except in enemies' imagination. Maskelyne had built army from canvas and air. It had changed the war more effectively than divisions of real tanks could have. The mad inventor's insane idea that fooling enemy was more valuable than fighting them directly had proven correct. Victory had been achieved not through superior force, but through superior deception. Not by building better tanks, but by convincing enemy to defend against tanks that weren't there.